The arena was filled with a hum of excitement, a gathering like no other. People from all corners of the galaxy had come to witness the greatest warrior in the universe. She was a living legend, unmatched in power, skill, and might. Her name was spoken with reverence and fear, and her victories were countless. In this world of advanced technology and ancient beings, there were few who dared to challenge her. And those who did, they never survived. She stood at the center of the arena, her glowing armor casting a soft blue light that danced across the walls. Her sharp, angular features reflected the cold confidence of a being who had never been defeated. The crowd watched in awe, but there was one thing she loved most about this moment: the humans. She had faced warriors from distant planets, creatures of unimaginable strength, but it was the humans who always amused her the most. To her they were weak, their bodies fragile, their minds limited, and their strength minuscule. She had seen them struggle and fail in countless ways, and every time she had stood victorious. Today, she stood tall, unbothered, and ready to remind the crowd of her greatness. Her eyes scanned the audience, looking for that one brave soul who might think themselves worthy of facing her. There was a deep, mocking smile on her lips. "Humans," she muttered, shaking her head with amusement. "How foolish they are to think they can challenge me." Her voice echoed through the arena, and her words were met with a wave of laughter. The humans in the crowd, those who had traveled light years to witness this event, were already preparing themselves for the next demonstration of her superiority. She could feel their admiration, but it was not for them that she had come here today. It was for the one person who would dare to step forward and challenge her. She knew there would be one. There always was. The air was thick with anticipation, as a figure stepped forward from the shadows, a single human daring to enter the arena. The warrior turned her attention to him. His posture was confident, but there was something different about him. Unlike the others who had come before him, he was not afraid. She could sense it. His gaze was unwavering, his shoulders broad and his stance firm. "You," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "You think you are worthy of standing against me?" The human didn't flinch. He stood his ground, eyes locked on hers, and nodded slowly. "I think I'm ready," he said simply. The crowd gasped, murmurs rippling through the stands. The warrior's lips curled into a smile as she took a step forward, her armor shifting with her movement. The challenge had been issued, and she was eager to prove her superiority once again. "You truly believe that you, a mere human, can defeat me?" she asked. Her voice was laced with mockery, but there was no anger in it, just a deep, overwhelming certainty that she was invincible. "What makes you think you are any different from the others?" She looked him up and down, noting the way his muscles tensed and his breath steadied. This human, like all the others before him, would soon realize the futility of his challenge. She would break him like the rest. He was no different. And yet, there was something about his calm that intrigued her. It wasn't fear. It wasn't doubt. His eyes held something else, a quiet, almost invisible confidence that stirred something unfamiliar in her. "Prepare yourself, human," she said with a hint of a challenge in her voice. "You will regret ever stepping into this arena." The crowd roared with excitement, but the warrior barely heard them. Her focus was solely on the man before her. She could almost see the fear slowly building within him, the uncertainty that would take over when faced with the full extent of her power. But it would be too late. She raised her hand, and the signal to begin was given. The human charged. It was a move she had seen countless times before. Every opponent, no matter how fierce or confident, made the same mistake. They came at her with all their might, only to fall prey to her overwhelming strength. She stepped to the side effortlessly, watching as he charged past her. His speed was impressive, but he lacked the power to match her. She let him spin around, facing her once again, and with a swift motion she attacked. Her fist landed hard against his chest, and the sound of the blow echoed through the arena. The human was sent flying back, crashing into the ground. The audience gasped, some in awe, others in fear, But the warrior felt nothing but satisfaction. This was how it always went. He would try to stand up to fight back, but it was all futile. She was too strong, too fast, too skilled. "Is that all you've got?" she taunted, walking toward him. "You are weak. You always were." The human, however, did not stay down. Slowly, painfully, he rose to his feet. There was a determination in his eyes, a fire that she had not expected. She took a step back, momentarily surprised. But then, she smirked. This will be over soon, she thought. But what the warrior did not know was that this human was unlike any she had faced before. And the real challenge, the real surprise, was about to unfold before her eyes. The warrior stood confidently, watching the human slowly get back on his feet. The crowd was silent, waiting for the next move, for the next display of her invincible might. The warrior could feel the power of the arena in the air, the energy of the spectators feeding into her own strength. She had faced countless challengers, each weaker than the last, and every time she triumphed without even breaking a sweat. This human, like all the others before him, would surely be no different. She let out a soft laugh, a sound filled with arrogance, as the human staggered to his feet. "Is that all you've got?" she mocked, her voice cutting through the tense silence. "You cannot defeat me. No human ever has. No human ever will." The man didn't respond with words. His chest heaved, his body bruised, but his eyes were still, locked on her with an intensity she hadn't expected. It was in his gaze, steady, unwavering. There was no fear, no hesitation, just pure resolve. The warrior tilted her head slightly, curiosity flickering within her. She had faced enemies who were more skilled, more powerful, even more resilient than this human. But never had she seen someone stand before her without a trace of fear. "How long can you keep this up?" she asked, her tone dripping with contempt. "You are out of your league." The human did not speak, but his stance remained firm, and the warrior saw something different in him now. It was subtle, but undeniable. It was as if something had changed. He wasn't the same man she had dismissed. Moments before, the warrior raised her hand again, preparing for the next strike. Her plan was clear: incapacitate him quickly, show the crowd the difference between a being like her and a human like him. But before she could launch herself at him again, the human moved. His movement was quick, deliberate, and unexpectedly precise. In one swift motion, the human pivoted to the side, avoiding her first strike with an agility she hadn't anticipated. He wasn't fast enough to dodge the second strike, but he absorbed the blow, pushing forward and driving her back with a surprising force. The warrior stumbled slightly, just enough to notice. For a moment, doubt flickered in her mind, but she quickly shoved it aside. She wasn't weak, she was the strongest being in the universe. Nothing could stand against her. But there it was again. Another blow, this time a solid strike to her side. It wasn't powerful enough to knock her off her feet, but it was strong enough to make her pause. What? The human had actually struck her. She hadn't been knocked down, but she'd felt the blow in a way she hadn't anticipated. It didn't hurt. She was too strong for pain to affect her. But the force behind it, the way it disrupted her focus, caught her off guard. She had never faced an opponent who could throw her off balance like this. For the first time, she was forced to react defensively. The warrior's instincts took over, and she began dodging more carefully, assessing her opponent's movements with a new level of respect. She saw the human's fists clenched, his movements calculated, and she realized that he wasn't just reacting to her strength, he was adapting. Impossible, she thought, watching as the human delivered another series of strikes, each one aimed with precision. There was something about the way he fought that was different from the others. It was as if he understood her. It was as if he knew how to exploit the weaknesses in her approach. How could this be? No human had ever fought like this before. The crowd remained silent, their eyes glued to the action. There was an energy in the air, a palpable sense of tension as the battle unfolded. No one could believe what they were witnessing. The mighty warrior, the undefeated champion, was being forced to fight for her victory. The human's strength was not in his size or his power. It was in his will, his persistence, and his ability to learn on the fly. The warrior's confidence began to falter. She had seen warriors defeat each other with strength, with brute force. But this human was different. His attacks were not simply based on force, they were based on understanding, on reading her movements and responding with calculated precision. She had underestimated him, and now it was too late. Her pride began to hurt her. She had spent so long believing in her invincibility that she had ignored the one thing that could truly defeat her: the power of the human spirit. The human was not just fighting to survive. He was fighting to prove something. He was fighting to show her that even the strongest could be challenged and even the most invincible could be broken. For a moment, the warrior hesitated, her mind racing. She had never felt like this before. It wasn't fear that gripped her, but something more unsettling: doubt. And for the first time in her life, doubt was enough to slow her down. The human saw it. He saw the shift in her posture, the brief moment of hesitation. It wasn't enough to defeat her. No, not yet. But it was a sign. She was no longer the unbeatable force she had once been. In this moment, she was just another fighter, just another warrior in an arena of countless challengers. The human moved again, his strike swift, his aim true. This time he caught her off guard. The blow landed harder than before, and the warrior was forced to retreat a few steps. What is this power? She thought, her thoughts racing as she staggered back. The audience erupted into murmurs, unsure of what they had just witnessed. The invincible warrior had been forced to retreat, something no one had ever seen before. The human, battered but unyielding, stood tall, ready for whatever came next. The warrior's chest heaved, her breathing rapid and shallow. She took another step back, her boots scraping against the cracked stone floor of the arena. The once confident air she had carried with her now seemed to waver. The human, this insignificant, weak creature in her eyes, had done the unthinkable. He had not only stood his ground, but had begun to push her back. Push her back. She couldn't fathom it. She had faced enemies far stronger than him, enemies that boasted unimaginable power, and yet none had made her feel this unsettled. The human had struck her in ways she hadn't anticipated. Each blow, though not as physically powerful as her own, carried an unexpected precision and purpose. He wasn't fighting with strength alone. He was fighting with something deeper, something that threatened to shatter her very understanding of what power meant. This is impossible. The thought echoed in her mind, refusing to be silenced. The human standing across from her seemed to notice her hesitation. His gaze, though still unwavering, now held a glimmer of determination, perhaps even a hint of something else. Belief. He wasn't just fighting her to survive anymore. No, he was fighting for something greater than that. He was fighting to prove that the invincible could fall, that even the greatest could be defeated by the human spirit. The warrior shook her head, as if trying to dispel the thoughts creeping into her mind. No, I am the greatest. I will not lose to this human. But with each moment that passed, her resolve wavered just a little more. Why? She had never doubted herself before. She had never been questioned in battle. Every opponent, every foe she had faced had fallen beneath her power without hesitation. So why now? Why was she feeling this shift in the air? The human advanced once more, his step steady, his body battered but unbroken. The warrior, still reeling from the shock of his last attack, steadied herself and raised her fists in preparation. She couldn't afford to let him see any more weakness, but deep down she knew that something had changed. She had always relied on her physical strength. It was her weapon, her shield, her identity. But this human, he wasn't like the others. He wasn't relying on brute force. He was relying on something far more dangerous: his ability to learn, adapt, and press forward no matter what. And it was this relentless drive that began to make her realize something that scared her to her core. Strength isn't always enough. Is that all you've got? She taunted again. But this time, The words felt hollow as soon as they left her mouth. The human didn't flinch at her challenge. Instead, he only seemed more determined. He had learned. He had adjusted his tactics. She had thrown all her force at him, but he had absorbed it, analyzed it, and used it to fuel his next move. It wasn't strength alone that was breaking through her defenses, it was his understanding. He was beginning to see the cracks in her invincible image. The warrior took a step back and quickly regained her composure. Her fingers tingled, and her mind raced. She needed to finish this quickly, or everything she had fought for, the reputation, the invincibility, would be at risk. I cannot let this human think he is stronger than me. But as she watched him prepare for the next round, something unsettling began to settle over her. His movements were fluid, calculated, and unyielding. The warrior was used to quick victories. She was used to overwhelming her opponents in a matter of seconds. But the human was different. Every move he made was deliberate. Every step he took an answer to her own. She had never encountered an enemy who learned as quickly as he did, and it was beginning to break through her armor of confidence. I must end this, she thought, narrowing her eyes. I cannot allow him to have the upper hand any longer. Without warning, the warrior lunged, her fist aimed directly for the human's chest. She was fast, calculating, and sure of herself, but this time, something was different. The human anticipated her move. He sidestepped with incredible agility, using her momentum against her, and before she could recover, he struck. It wasn't the most powerful blow, but it was enough to make her falter. She stumbled back, her breath caught in her throat. This was no longer a simple fight. This was a challenge to everything she believed about herself. Her once unshakable confidence had begun to crack, piece by piece, as the human stood before her, unwavering. The audience, who had watched in awe as the warrior dominated her previous opponents, now murmured in disbelief. No one had ever seen her struggle. And now, before their very eyes, she was fighting not just for victory, but for something deeper. Her pride, her image, her identity. The warrior's mind raced, but in the midst of the chaos, a thought occurred, to her, one she hadn't allowed herself to consider until now. Could this human really defeat her? The question hung in the air, silent but deafening. The crowd, once cheering for her every move, now held their breath as the human pressed on. He was relentless. His spirit, his drive, was unlike anything she had ever encountered. And in that moment, the warrior realized the truth. The human had already won. Not in strength, not in power, but in something far more dangerous. The ability to challenge what she thought was invincible. She had been so focused on defeating him physically that she had never considered the possibility that he would challenge her in a way she could not predict. With every strike, with every move, he was breaking down her invincible image. And for the first time in her life, the warrior wasn't sure if she could win this fight. As she staggered back, her armor now scratched and dented, she looked into the human's eyes. The truth was clear. He wasn't fighting to win. He was fighting to make her realize something that she had never considered before. Even the strongest can be challenged, and that realization stung more than any physical blow ever could. The warrior stood at the edge of the arena, her chest heaving with each breath. Sweat dripped down her brow, and her once glowing armor, which had been a symbol of invincibility, was now marred by scratches and dents. Her confidence had crumbled. Her pride had been shattered, and for the first time in her life she felt something she could not easily push away. Fear. The human stood across from her, bloodied but not beaten, his eyes still fierce with determination. His body was bruised, but it was his spirit that had kept him standing, and she realized that was something she had underestimated from the very beginning. The arena was silent, the audience holding their breath. This battle had become more than a fight for survival. It had become a test of wills, a contest of belief and strength that no one had anticipated, not even the warrior herself. How had it come to this? She had been so sure, so certain of her invincibility. She had always relied on her power, her unmatched skills, and her perfect record. But now, standing here, facing this human, this fragile, weak creature in her eyes. She saw something in him that she had never seen in anyone else. The human had something she had lost long ago, the power to believe in oneself. As she looked into his eyes, something shifted inside her. This wasn't about physical strength anymore. This wasn't about who could hit harder or who could move faster. It was about something deeper, about recognizing the strength in others, even when they seemed weak. It was about humility. The warrior took a deep breath, her fists still clenched. She had never been one to back down. She had never been one to give in. But in this moment, she knew something had changed within her. This human had broken through the walls she had built around herself, walls made of arrogance, pride, and the belief that no one could ever challenge her. But this human had. And for the first time, the warrior realized that there was power in acknowledging her vulnerability. There was strength in admitting that she could be defeated. But she also understood now that the true measure of power wasn't how hard you could fight. It was how hard you could fall and get back up again. The human stepped forward, his movements slow but deliberate. His breath was shallow, his body aching, but his resolve had not wavered. He had come to understand her as well. He had studied her every move, her every weakness, and yet he wasn't driven by a desire for victory alone. He was driven by something more. Respect. The warrior's eyes softened for a moment. She didn't need to ask for an explanation. She knew what he was trying to tell her with his silent stance. He wasn't here to prove that humans were stronger. He was here to show her that strength didn't come from defeating others. It came from understanding and pushing through your own limitations. The crowd was still. And in that moment of stillness, the warrior made her choice. She would not fight him anymore. Not with the intention to defeat him. Not with the intent to crush him. Instead, she would fight alongside him, not against him. They were no longer adversaries, they were equals. The warrior took a step toward the human. Her movement was hesitant at first, unsure. But as her eyes met his once more, she saw no mockery, no triumph in his gaze, only acceptance. He didn't see her as the mighty warrior. He saw her as a fellow fighter, struggling just as he had. And with that understanding, something clicked inside her. With renewed strength, the warrior raised her hand not to strike but to offer it. The human looked at her in confusion for a split second. But then he understood. Slowly he took her hand in his, and for a brief moment, time seemed to stop. The warrior had finally surrendered not to defeat, but to something far more powerful: redemption. The crowd gasped, their eyes wide with shock. They had come to watch the mighty warrior defeat the human, to witness another easy victory. But instead they were witnessing something they had never seen before, an act of humility from the strongest being in the universe. The warrior's hand tightened around his, and she spoke for the first time with sincerity, her voice soft but strong. "I was wrong. You are not weak. You are stronger than I ever realized." The human nodded, his expression softening. "Strength is not always measured in the blows we land," he said quietly. "It's in the strength to rise after we fall. That's the true test of power." For the first time in her life, the warrior smiled. It wasn't a smile of arrogance, but one of understanding. A smile that acknowledged the truth she had ignored for so long. She wasn't invincible because of her power. She was invincible because she had the ability to change, to grow, to learn from her mistakes. And in that moment, the warrior understood something profound. Victory doesn't always lie in the battle. We win. It lies in the battles we choose to fight with honor and humility. With a final nod, she turned toward the arena's exit. The crowd stood in stunned silence, not knowing what to say, but deep down they knew this moment would be remembered forever. The warrior who had been unbeatable had now become a symbol of something far greater than strength. Redemption. As the warrior walked away, the human remained in the center of the arena, his chest swelling with pride. Not from victory, but from knowing that sometimes the greatest victory is the one where we acknowledge our shared humanity. The crowd erupted into applause, and for the first time the warrior stood tall, not because she had defeated her opponent, but because she had learned to overcome her own pride. The battle was over, and both had won. And in that moment, both, the warrior and the human, knew that the true power lay not in the fight, but in the understanding of one another.